Well, welcome, my friends, back to a new edition of More Bad News, brought to you, as always, by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge. Smoke Camels for 30 days and see for yourself what this product can do for your life. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news. Uh, Following up on the theme of Lake Mead and Lake Powell, which I mentioned last week, I read this week that the Great Salt Lake outside of Utah, since 1950, it has lost about 70% of its water and about 60% of its area. And this about 5 years. In 5 years, it'll be bone dry, and it creates a real serious problem for Salt Lake City because what it's leaving is arsenic and other poisonous heavy metals that will be just blown away at every storm, and cover this city of Utah with horrific air pollution. So you know that I'm a historian, and also last week the United Nations issued a report. There were 100 million refugees last year, and after World War II, there were 70 million refugees. Last year there were 100 million. We are moving in devastatingly bad direction. And we're heading into a ferocious La Nina season, which the oceans are already warmer than they've ever been, and we're going to see some really extraordinary climate catastrophes heading our way. So last week I released two videos, and one of them was on my Corbono program I was going to do, and surprisingly it did very well. Twice as many people watched that lecture, that very esoteric lecture about Corbono, than my normal lecture on Benjamin Franklin and his son William. But having issued the two, right afterwards I really felt like I needed to do another one because it was Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday, and I was very disappointed here in Big Rapids to see the garbage collection went ahead. They didn't move that. The university closed and the banks closed, but other than that, the charter school was open. It was business as usual, And I wanted to say something about Black lives and Black Lives Matter from my perspective, growing up in America and going to school and studying American history, where you touch upon mostly American history is about white people, but in the colonial period you touch on the subject of slavery. Before this, then you forget about them. Then right before the Civil War, you introduce it again because slavery is going to lead to the Civil War. Then there's Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation, which is all attributed to Abraham Lincoln and white people emancipated Black people. And of course, that wasn't true at all. Throughout American history, the most ferocious warriors for freedom have been Africans who were first enslaved and then had to fight for their freedom and emancipated themselves in the Civil War. They fought for themselves. 1 million of them, ran away from slavery during the Civil War, and then came back and fought with the Union Army. I mean, it's this idea that white people emancipated Black people in the Civil War is absurd. And then what you have is, after the Civil War, you have Reconstruction, and after Reconstruction then collapses, you have the imposition of this second system of white supremacy, the Jim Crow system, which many historians believe is the nadir of existence for African Americans, which belies this idea of progress. It didn't go from slavery to freedom, and from freedom to civil rights, and from this idea that it is a pageant of progress. In fact, Martin Luther King's saying he has this dream, and he reached this mountaintop, and he could see in the future this time when there would be no white supremacy in America, where there would be no racism. And of course, look around today. It's we're not even going in the right direction. I mean, it's just so my perspective has always been that history is not progressive, that we're not moving forward. We're moving towards our end. We're moving towards the collapse of our civilization and the end of our species, and that means that there's no messianic era. There's no period in which everything's going to get better. What you're going to see is everything is going to get worse, unfortunately. So what I wanted to just show you a few things that I would like to recommend and to you as far as Black Lives Mattering. First, this is Tanisha Coates' book on what it's like to be a father of a Black child. And as the father of a Jewish child, I really felt very strongly, you really understand the dangers of bringing a child into a world that's hostile. And this is a very powerful book. And it's a very simple book. It's just a little thing. You should read it. If you haven't read it, it's worth reading. But then this is the fabulous books. It's the three mothers. It's the mother of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. And again, it's very much similar to Tanisha Coates. She is the mother of a Black child, and talks about this gut-wrenching fear that the parents of Black children often have. It's a very hostile world that they come into. Now, my career focused on so there are three systems of white supremacy, as far as I could see. The first one was the slave system, which was a system of white supremacy. It didn't start out that way. The colonies did not start out as slave colonies. England didn't have slavery at the time, so that what you have is these Africans arriving. They're indentured. They're not slaves, and a slave system slowly emerging. Massachusetts was the first state to actually recognize slavery as a legal institution in 1641. Virginia didn't recognize slavery until 1661, so Massachusetts was 20 years earlier. And the first system really takes from the time that the first Africans arrive. It takes about 80 years, really, and it's not until 1700 that you really have a system of white supremacy that's locked down. Legal system, economic system, all these kinds of laws that regulate slavery. And then when that system collapsed in the Civil War, a second system emerged out of the mess, and it didn't really emerge until 1900. And that second system was the Jim Crow system, which involved massive lynchings, terror. By the 1890s, many historians believe that the 1890s was the low point for African Americans, worse than slavery. It was just absolutely horrifying. Killing a Black person in America was really never a crime. I mean, you could see that in the civil rights era when they began looking at these lynchings. The lynchings occurred all the time. So after in the 1960s, then between the second Reconstruction is the period from 1954 to 1965, the period in which the Supreme Court first strikes down Brown v. Board of Education, and then you have the Civil Rights Movement. That's where Martin Luther King Jr. emerges, and then you have the passing of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, 64 and 65. And that's considered the end of the Jim Crow system, because legally its foundation was taken apart. But this is the other book that I would really recommend. This is The New Jim Crow, because I think that Michelle Alexander has really done a very good job of countering this notion that things are getting better all the time. What I have seen is that you have one system of white supremacy replaced by a second system of white supremacy, replaced by a third system of white supremacy. And the fact is that today in the United States, racism is worse than it's ever been in, as far as I can tell, in my lifetime. So I think that it's important for us to recognize that Black lives matter, but they haven't really mattered in American history, and that it's a struggle. So it's really a fundamental difference in perspective. Obviously, I do not believe that we are headed towards a world in which social problems will be solved, in which the antagonisms between racial and ethnic groups will dissolve, and we'll have a world in which the lion will lay down with the lamb. That is not going to happen. And that means that those of us who have compassion and who want to oppose the growing intolerance and brutality have to dig in our heels, recognizing the fact that this is not a game that we're going to win. This is a game that we're just going to have to fight to the bitter end in order to maintain some semblance of humanity. And we're not going to be able to maintain humanity because humanity is going to go extinct. So I know it's bad news, but that's all I have is more bad news. And I'm going to leave it there for you. We'll certainly have another week. I'll see you next week with some more bad news. And in the meantime, I'm releasing the first video of my Corbonos lectures if you're interested. Okay. So with that, bye-bye. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week.